Technically, I started my first business back in 1997, but it wasn't officially a business until 1999. And that was when I got back into the States. And I did everything that you can think of wrong in that very first business. And I suffered the consequences. I didn't think the consequences needed to be as severe as they were at the time. But like I said, it was what it was.
It is what it is. It is what it is.
I lived, I learned, but I sure did do a bunch wrong. Want to know more? Then keep watching. Let's get to work. So the first thing that I did wrong was I didn't think of my very first business as a business, nor did I treat it as a business. And when I say that, I mean there's a very distinct thought process and mindset that goes into believing that what you are growing can truly function as a multi-million dollar or multi-six-figure business. It means that you're going to focus on creating strategy, and you're going to create marketing campaigns. You're going to create processes. You're going to figure out ways to make things more efficient. You're going to evaluate numbers. You're going to just think like a CEO, and you're going to treat what you're doing like you're a CEO and treat it like a business, and ultimately treat it like something that you want to grow and that you ultimately want to do full time and that you want to make your bread and butter. And I did not treat my first business that way. I literally was in the it's a side hustle mindset. And even from the very beginning, I think that I was like, well, this will be a great way for me to make some side money, for me to make a savings. I think at the time I was trying to save for my first house. I was in my early 20s, and I was using my side business, even though I knew that because my average consulting contract, I mean, it was a consulting business. I've always been a consultant. I've always sold my intellectual property. And I think at the time, my average contract was like, and this is like, you know, the late 90s, like $3,000 or $5,000 for a few months worth of consulting work. And so for me, I was doing one contract at a time. And so, you know, every quarter I was earning like an extra $3,000 to $5,000. And my goal was to save up money for a house. And I was, you know, newly married. I had a really young child. And I was just thinking of it like a side hustle, thinking of a way to make extra money. My heart, my soul, my hard work, everything was still dedicated to growing someone else's dream. And because I was in that mindset, because I was in that mind frame, and I wasn't focused from the very beginning on making it a true business, I was okay with it being a side hustle. And I was telling myself every single day that it was like an extra, you know, piece of income for me and not the income for me, which means that it was never really going to reach its full potential. That mindset problem that I was having was truthfully impacting the ability for me to get out from underneath other people. I mean, just think about it. If I was earning $5,000 a quarter with one client, all I really, and honestly, that was like part-time. I was not working 40 hours a week on one client. I could have added 4 or 5 more clients and probably been doing a 30 or 40 hour work week. And you're talking about, you know, 4 to 5 clients a quarter. That's like 20 grand, you know, 30 grand a quarter that I could have really been making. And at the end of that year, I'm already at 6 figures. I wasn't even earning close to that in my full-time gig. I think I was maybe at like 45 or 50,000 with a degree and a master's degree in the 90s. And so, you know, 40, 50,000 at that time was good money, but I wasn't even thinking beyond that. And that mindset meant that my business couldn't reach its fullest potential because I didn't let it. My mind didn't let it. And also, I was really truly focused on using my skills to grow somebody else's, quite frankly. I mean, I had the ability, I had the skills, and I was giving my all 40, sometimes 50 hours a week to somebody else's thing and was treating my own thing like it was a side gig and a side hustle and something part-time. Now, I'm not saying that there is anything wrong with that. You may be out there and thinking of what you're doing right now as something that's great to do part-time. That's okay. If that's what you set your mind out to do from the very beginning, because that's ultimately what you want, then that's fine. But that wasn't what I wanted. I would tell myself speak to myself, think all the time, I could do this full time. I want to have my own dream. I want to leave a legacy for my children. I want to build a multi-million-dollar empire, but was mentally still acting like it was just going to always be a side gig. And so that was pretty much the first thing that I did wrong. The second big thing that I did wrong was putting unnecessary extra people on the paperwork. What do I mean? Now I have coachees and I have students, and oftentimes we are sometimes working through their startup paperwork and their startup stuff, especially in my newest course all about setting up the business. And they oftentimes think that if they're married, in my particular instance, I'm talking about married. When I say putting extra people on the paperwork unnecessarily, it means actually putting someone else's name on your articles of incorporation. When you register your business, putting someone else's name on there. And Ohio is a state that allows for single member LLCs. I knew that. And so I actually put my ex-husband's name on that business, thinking that because I was someone's wife, I was supposed to do that. And thinking that we're married, we're going to be together forever, and this is our business, even though it was truly my business, not our business, my business. I put his name on the paperwork. And in essence, we were a 2-member LLC, which then became treated as a partnership, which is a whole nother issue. And I can't get into that right now, but for tax purposes and even for compensation purposes, it created a whole nightmare. But I wasn't at that point to be thinking of it that way, right? I know what I know now about partnerships. I know what I know now. But back then I was like, oh, he's my husband. I love him. It's ours. What's mine is his. What's mine is his, and what's his is mine. And yeah, that was a big, huge mistake. Put him on the paperwork, and it turned out to be pretty much a nightmare. So putting extra people on your business's paperwork out of feeling of guilt or obligation or assumption is wrong. Don't do it. If it's your business, even if you want someone else to be involved, even if you want to leave it to someone else, even if you think it's going to be whatever, if it's your business, it's your idea, it's your brainchild, it's your brain power, it's your intellectual property that's going to be being sold, your name is the only name that needs to go on that business. Everything else, who you leave it to and who's going to take it over and all that kind of stuff, comes later. What you don't want to do is necessarily have your articles of incorporation include someone else's name or signature, because that automatically includes them in the start of your empire. The third thing that I did wrong, and this was a biggie, and I teach a lot about it now, it's probably a part of the reason why I'm so passionate about it, is I used my home address as my business address. I did not realize how wrong that was back then. I realized it after what ultimately ended up happening, that I'm about to share with you, happened. But using my home address as my business address was all that I really knew. It was what I thought I was supposed to do, because I technically was running my business out of my home. I was working from home. And it wasn't a good idea for a number of different reasons, but one of them was because I didn't realize that the problems that was going to have for me with regards to privacy. My home address became kind of public knowledge because it was on my paperwork in 2 areas, which I'm going to talk about the other thing I did wrong, but it was on my paperwork in 2 areas. It was also the only address I had. So at the time when I had letterhead, because there really weren't websites back then, and that's funny to say, but there really weren't websites back then, y'all. I know, I'm old. But my letterhead had my home address on it. My business cards had my home address on it because it was my business address. And I don't even know if I was allowed to do that. I was living in an apartment at the time. I had not bought my first house yet, and I didn't even know if my apartment allowed it. Like, I didn't even check my lease or anything like that. And technically I could have gotten into some big trouble and even gotten kicked out of my apartment, had my business really blown up. So I guess it was a good thing that it really didn't blow up, because it could have, and then I probably would have got kicked out of my apartment, because I'm pretty certain that I wasn't allowed to run a business out of my 2-bedroom apartment that I had at that time. So using my home address as my business address was a huge mistake. mistake, but it also complicated things from a number of different perspectives that I'm going to talk about what ultimately ended up happening with this business. But using my home address wasn't a good idea. I had no privacy. I was probably doing it illegally. And what I didn't know then, but what I do know now, is that it was really limiting the liability protection that I had by creating the LLC in the first place, because there was a complete blurry line between what was business and what was personal in my life at the time. And in essence, I had pierced the corporate veil. And that is something that you can ultimately Google if you don't know what that means. But piercing the corporate veil is kind of a big deal. And when you do, it opens your personal assets up to some liability that it doesn't necessarily need to have, which is the whole reason why you start an LLC, is to kind of give your personal assets liability protection. And so I had kind of, blurred that line so significantly in choosing that home address and really publicly having that home address. Not to mention, I wasn't even thinking about it then, but like business credit and, business assets, business loans, business, all of that stuff would have been detrimentally affected by that decision. So that was pretty big. It was one of the biggest things that I did wrong as well, thinking back. But of course, hindsight is 2020, which is why I teach what I teach, so that I can be your hindsight. The fourth thing that I did wrong was not have an operating agreement. I didn't even understand the significance of an operating agreement, y'all. And I think in my mind, I had gone to school, I had done business school and all that kind of stuff. So I knew what it was, but in my mind, I was a single entity. I was a single person entity. Even though I had put somebody else's name on my paperwork. Go figure. I don't know what I was thinking. And I'm definitely not a dummy. So I don't know where my mind was at. Probably, in love, because that's what I do, y'all. I falls hard when I fall. Don't fall often, but when I do, I falls hard. So anyway, I'm going to change the subject on that right now. I didn't have an operating agreement because in my mind, I was like, well, I'm the only one that runs the business, so why do I need an operating agreement with myself? But the reality is, I still needed an operating agreement. I still needed something in place that would talk about what would happen with my business if something happened to me, what I wanted my business to function as, how I wanted my business to operate. And really, truthfully, because I did have someone else's name on my paperwork, I should have had an operating agreement that specifically talked about what would happen if we broke up or things were dissolved in our world, what was going to happen to the business. And I didn't. I just didn't take the step of actually doing one, which is a part of the reason why in my course I give away an operating agreement template, because I think it's so critical. I learned so much from that very first experience. And ever since then, I've had businesses that have had partners in them. I've had businesses that have had other people involved in them, not necessarily on the paperwork. I just want to be clear, not on the paperwork, but definitely involved in the business. And they were involved in the business as partners through an operating agreement or a partnership agreement, not on the paperwork. Anyway, but those operating agreements and partnership agreements have come in extremely handy. They are very, very beneficial, and they are very, very key. So not having one was a pretty big mistake. I would say a huge one for this particular business. And when I'm getting ready to tell you how it all worked out, you'll understand. The fifth thing that I did wrong in my first business was I chose the wrong registered agent. Yes, so I have done an entire video on registered agents, and it is definitely on CPTV. All you got to do is kind of search and you can do it, but I will also link to it right here somewhere so that you can understand what a registered agent is and how important choosing one or having one is. In essence, it is the person that you choose to have on file for your business that would receive due process paperwork or legal paperwork on your behalf. They have to have a physical address, and they have to be able to physically, receive papers. If you ever get served with anything or anything like that, that's what your registered agent is. It is also the address that shows when someone searches your business. So the actual address that you put when you register and put your information on there isn't the one that will actually show when someone goes to your state website and looks up your business and wants to see if you're active and what your actual paperwork says. Your agent's address will show. And so for instance, my business, if you go, it's going to show my attorney as the agent, and that is who is going to receive paperwork, because that's the whole purpose of that agent. Well, I chose myself and my own home address as my agent. And can you choose yourself? Yes. And if I had received the paperwork, I would have probably called an attorney anyway and gotten some help. I mean, at the time, I was my very first business, so I didn't have an attorney or couldn't have one. But my home address was a whole different thing. And because your agent needs to have a physical address where they can receive being served, a P.O. box wasn't even an option. And I didn't even know what I didn't know back then. So my home address was the public facing address for my business. And that was because my agent was myself and I used my home address as my agent. I have since obviously learned a lot out of choosing the appropriate agent, even if you decided to use a service to do and be your registered agent. It makes more sense, but because it's going to be that public facing address. And again, privacy was completely removed once my home address and I were listed as that registered agent. And the sixth thing that I did wrong was I used my personal account to pay for business things. And I did not set up my financial structure properly. I used my personal account to pay for the registration. I used my personal account to pay for like letterhead and business cards and supplies and all of those things. And at the time, it was a huge mistake because using your personal account is definitely blurring the lines. It never realized that I needed to set up a bank account or how important a business bank account was and how important it was to keep my business money separate from my personal money. Even if I was paying myself, all my business money should have gone into and come out of a business account. And I would have ultimately then paid myself from that business account to use personally. I didn't understand that dynamic. I didn't understand how big of a deal it really was. And so I didn't do it. I was using my personal account, which was a joint account with my ex-husband or my husband at the time, to pay for business things. And it was a complete, paper trail in my personal account of all of the business things that I paid for with it. I mean, I knew that there were business expenses that I could take, like gas or, restaurant dinners and coffees and meetings and stuff that I actually had. Because at the time there wasn't like Zoom and stuff, so a lot of my stuff was face-to-face or events that I would attend in order to meet clients, or even gas or parking when I would actually go on site to their offices. But so I just used my personal account, and then my business money went in my personal account as if it was income. And that was a big no-no. And I'm about to tell you all the way what ultimately happened and why all of these things, if you are doing them, are things that you are not going to want to do, because it could be the nail in the coffin of your business. And here, my love, is why. So what ended up happening? What ended up happening with all of those don'ts, right? All the stuff that I did wrong. Well, before I get into the specifics, I just want to make sure that you're hearing what I'm saying. If you have done any of these things that I did wrong, that I just mentioned to you, you still have time to ultimately fix them. You still have time to put your business in order and get it in order in the right way. And I've mentioned this in my previous couple of videos, and I want to make sure that you guys are aware that effective today, my training on the startup roadmap and getting your business in order training is currently available. And I know that I have been promising it for a couple of weeks, but this training is literally designed to teach you exactly what you need to do in order to set up your business structure step by step and in order. What you should do first, what you should do second, what you should do third, and why you need to do all of those things in order to make sure that your business has the structure it needs in order to grow and survive and to be sustainable. And these are things that I teach not just from years of opening and starting businesses and helping other entrepreneurs do it, but because again, these were my experiences and I had to learn the hard way why all of these don'ts that I'm telling you about right now should not happen. So if you would like to have access to that free training, it's a long one, so I can't make a YouTube video out of it, but it is a free training that will walk you through the what's, the steps in order of exactly what you need to do in order to set up your business structure from A to Z. So you're going to want to go ahead and head over to this link right here to access that free training, because it is there, it is ready, it is all set for you. And I think it's important to continue to share this insight. And while you are down there checking out the link, it's also going to be in the description and in the comments, but it's also right here on the screen. So make sure that you click it and check out the training. It's going to be so important. It is a labor of love that I put together, a free complete training. It's about an hour long, so definitely get your notebook out, but go ahead and grab it. And while you're down there, if you're finding value in what I'm talking about, if I'm sharing any tea, if I'm giving you any great insight, make sure that you smash that like button for me and go ahead and subscribe and share this video with anybody else that you know needs to hear it. Okay, so what happened? Well, my divorce. But what do I mean? I mean, why did my divorce happening have anything to do with all these don'ts? Well, I'm not sure, unless you are a part of the CP family or you are already on my CP newsletter, are you even aware of this story? But my divorce created a dynamic in my life at the time where I had to ultimately give up and dissolve that first business. And the reason being is because as I was going through my divorce, which was a horrible time, a completely stressful time, I felt like a failure. I was devastated. I had a less than 2-year-old son at the time. And I don't do well with failure. So I literally felt like, going through the divorce was a failure, and I hated it. I hated all things about it. But above all that, remember I said that business was bringing in, an extra 20 grand, 25 grand a year for me. And it had a goal, and I was able to kind of live a lifestyle, get my son what he wanted, and ultimately save up for my house. Well, when that divorce became a reality, one of the things that my ex-husband did very well was fight me every step of the way through that divorce. I don't even know why, y'all, because he messed up. And so his mess up to me indicated and dictated that he didn't want to be with me no more. So I thought he'd be running for the hills as soon as I said, I want a divorce. But no, it was a big freaking fight. And one of the biggest issues that held up my divorce, and it lasted for a pretty long time, was the fact that I was building this nest egg on the side. And the money, we lived off of together. We enjoyed things together, and he wanted it. And he basically said that he helped me start the business, and it was our business, and he invested in the business. And because of that, he was entitled to 50% of everything that business earned forever. Yeah, forever. And of course, I was like, that is a lie. That is not true. That is not even close to being true. You did not start the business. You did not invest in the business. You did not contribute to the business. You don't participate in the business, and you don't do anything. You didn't even encourage me to start the damn business. Like, you have no idea what I do in that business. But the reality of it was, in order to make me miserable, those were the demands. And it really did delay the entire divorce process, because I was at a point where I thought that I was going to be okay, and that I thought that it would be fine, that I'd be able to just say he didn't have anything to do with it. And my attorney at the time went through all of the paperwork that I provided him with and communicated very clearly to me that there was nothing in the way that I set my business up. All of those things that I just talked to you about, right? There was nothing in the way that I set my business up that could negate what he was saying. The paperwork, as a matter of fact, and the setup, as a matter of fact, actually spoke to what he was saying. Because I used our personal bank account to start the business and to pay for things, even though money was coming in, because I was using our joint personal bank account to pay for things for the business, he technically was investing in the business. And because his name was on the articles of incorporation, he technically started the business. And because there was no operating agreement that stated that I was the sole member of the organization, he technically was a part of the business. And because even though he was not on any of the work product or never did anything with relationship to the business, everything else, our home address was the address of the business. Our personal account, I was the registered agent at our home address for the business. And so because all of the things that I used personally for this business was ours jointly, the perception was everything that he was saying about the business was true. And the only way that I was going to be able to get out from underneath the obligation to potentially have to give him money, half of whatever that business earned, for a very long time, not forever, but for a very long time, even though I was going to have our child and was entitled to some child support, the only way that I was going to be able to avoid having to do that was to let the business die. Let it die. And that was traumatic for me, because that meant starting all over again. And technically, all of the clients that I had worked with over the course of that 3 years that I had been doing that as a side hustle had to be left alone for a minimum of 6 months to a year after the divorce was final in order for that business to really truly die. And so that meant that all of my networking efforts and all of those little marketing efforts that I had done were null and void, and I had to pretty much start over from scratch. And don't get me wrong, I was determined to do it, and I did ultimately end up doing it, but I learned so much about what I did wrong, because that was what happened. My business failed. My business went away. My business had to go away. It had to dissolve. It had to be done with, because I didn't set it up right. I didn't set up the right business structure. I didn't take it seriously. I didn't have the right mindset. And I ultimately was treating it like a side hustle and not a real business. But that was the wake-up call that I needed, y'all. That was the wake-up call that I needed, because at that point, after that happened, I was good to go, and I knew better from that point on and have not made the same mistakes again. And again, that is why I made that training. So if you haven't accessed it, make sure you take a look. The link down here, link in the description, link in the comments, check it out, because it will walk you through the steps that you need to do in order to get your business in order and to set up your business structure. And so my goal here and my lesson in all of this is, don't be like me. Don't be like me. Watch the training. Set it up the right way. It does completely matter. It matters for your business to be set up and functioning in the right way if you truly want it to be a business. Don't be like me, y'all. Just don't be like me. I'm pouring my heart out here, being vulnerable, letting you know of the dummy that I was at one point. But that's okay, because 20 some years later, I'm cool. I'm chilling. And until next time, my loves, I will see you very soon. Stay safe. Bye-bye. Mwah!